Yes.
He sounds lovely.
You must be from Scotland.
Greetings from Pakistan. Thank you for letting me in.
Okay, shall we start now? Okay. I welcome our participants from Thailand and abroad for joining us in another activity of PSU Open Mobility 2022. I wish this could be a productive moment for us all to exchange ideas. In this session, our invited speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Robert McKenzie, will present and discuss his ideas and experience under the topic of research methods in applied and sociolinguistics. And before we move on, allow me to briefly introduce today's moderator, Dr. Bayati Diraman. And Dr. Diraman is a lecturer at the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Princess of Songkhla University, Thailand. She completed her PhD in Applied Linguistics from University Uttara, Malaysia. Her research interests include teaching and learning English as an international language, intercultural communication, and intercultural awareness, discourse and critical discourse analysis, and sociolinguistics. Now, let's wait no longer, and I'm going to let Dr. Diraman continue with the session.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Yusuf, for such a nice introduction. My name is Bayati Diraman. Today, I will be the moderator for today's event on the topic entitled Research Methods in Applied and Sociolinguistics. We all know that language has a strong connection with social factors, such as geographical origin, profession, economic status, religion, gender, and politics. They all play important roles in shaping our worldviews and thus affect variations in our linguistic choices. For us as language educators and researchers, we need to learn and use appropriate methods that match our research inquiries in this area, or else there will be an issue on validity or reliability of our findings. So if you are currently doing applied and sociolinguistic research or plan to do one in the near future, today is another recommended event for you. So today's session will run for 2 hours. During the presentation, you may want to ask questions directly to the speaker by unmuting your microphone, or you may type them in the chat box and I will read it when appropriate. Towards the end of the presentation, we will send a link of evaluation form for you to complete, then followed by a link for the e-certificate. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our honorable speaker today, Professor Dr. Robert McKenzie. Professor Robert McKenzie is Associate Professor in Sociolinguistics at Northumbria University, UK. His research is focused principally in the areas of variationist sociolinguistics, folk linguistics, global Englishes, social psychology of language, as well as quantitative and qualitative research methods in applied and sociolinguistics. He has a particular interest in public perceptions and attitudes towards spoken language variation in the UK and Southeast and East Asia. Professor Robert has undertaken a number of large-scale empirical research projects investigating the sociolinguistics of English in the UK, in Thailand, Japan, and Malaysia, and has published extensively in journals such as Lingua, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development, International Journal of Applied Linguistics, Language Awareness, Asian Englishes, Discourse and Communication, and International Journal of the Sociology of Language. In 2010, Professor Robert published a widely cited research monograph, The Social Psychology of English as a Global Language by Springer. His second monograph, Implicit and Explicit Language Attitudes, Mapping Linguistic Prejudice and Attitude Change in England, which was published in July 2022 by Routledge. His research has featured in a large number of newspapers, television, and radio outlets, both within and out with the UK. He is founding director of the Speaking of Prejudice project. So now I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Robert. Now, Professor Dr. Robert, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Baiti and Dr. Yusuf. That's very nice. What a lovely introduction. Thanks so much. I'll share the screen first of all, and thank you also too, because I realise you're from many different parts of the world. It's 8:30 in the morning in the UK. It's dark, but it's getting light, and it's 0 degrees. I've just talked to Dr. Yusuf there, and he's told me that it's now 30 degrees in the south of Thailand and raining. So I'm guessing wherever you come from, it's very different from me at the moment. I'll share my screen first, and then I'll talk about what I'm going to do. I think this is the right one. Yeah. Where are we? Yeah, here we go. Whoops. And I'll share it. Just please bear with me. I'm not a Zoom person. I'm a Teams person. In the UK, we often use Teams. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Is it okay? Yeah. Please tell. And please tell me if, for example, if I'm not clear or I'm speaking too fast or too slowly. I realise we've got 2 hours, and 2 hours is a long time to speak with, to listen to someone. Yeah. Especially someone new if you haven't heard the Scottish accent before.
Actually, you can present for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and you can leave for another 30 minutes for Q&A session, something like that. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I've also got some questions to give you time to think, because listening to someone, particularly if English is your L2, for 90 minutes is quite a long time. So I realise some of you might have been to the other ones. So, as I said before, this is research methods in applied and social linguistics, but I've been teaching research methods for quite a long time. As you can see, I'm quite old. And I've taught research methods to psychology students, to social science students, to very, very linguistic students, to teachers of English, etc., etc. And it seems to me that as linguistics and applied linguistics, or ELT, develops, we're doing more and more research, and that research has parameters and established ways of doing it. I'm quite happy to share them with you, and I'm also happy for your comments. Of course, because I'm a variationist, I'm interested in language variation. Some of the things I talk about will be about language variation, but I've also tried to talk a little bit about second language acquisition and a little bit about education, particularly about types of research questions and how we might do it. I also, at the end, have a little bit about how we might structure a paper. I'm not sure if I'll get to that in an hour and a half. If not, I'll send it to to Dr. Yusuf, and he may be able to put it on, for example, Facebook or the site, if that's okay. Okay. Let's go then. Research methods in applied and social linguistics. Thank you for coming this Saturday afternoon. I realise the title's quite dry. I was trying to think of something more sexy, but you know, I think we are where we are. Okay, so when we're looking at linguistics or applied linguistics or social linguistics, we can call that the scientific study of language. That's what people often say. What do you do? I study linguistics. How many languages do you speak? No. Okay, it's not about how much, it's about the scientific study of language. And then someone might say to you, what's science? And that's a hard question. Okay, and science, and you know, in Asia and in Europe and North America has hundreds and hundreds of years of background, and whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative research or a mixture of both, we're using scientific principles. And before I start about qualitative and quantitative, for me, research isn't good or bad, qualitative or quantitative. It's either robust or it's not. Okay, so it's not whether qualitative or quantitative is better. It's about what we're doing. Okay, and when people think of science, they might think of this. And the mathematics on the bottom, don't ask me either. It's been a long time since I've studied mathematics. Okay. So when people think about science, they think of this. And this idea of science is based on what we call the scientific method. So traditionally, scientists in whatever field, chemistry, maths, linguistics, social sciences, we observe something, phenomenon, a construct, if you like. We formulate a hypothesis or research question to investigate what we want to know, the research question that we want to know. And I'll talk a little bit about hypothesis and research questions later. And then we carry out an experiment or collect further observations to test this hypothesis. And the data either confirms what we think and we accept it, but we don't prove it, we accept it on evidence, or if we deny it, if we didn't find what we wanted to, we formulate a different hypothesis. And that's how science moves. It doesn't matter whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative research, you're really doing this all the time. So what we do is we have the research questions and then we think about the method, how we're going to investigate those research questions. Okay, we don't start with, I have a ruler, what can I measure? Okay, we don't go around with a ruler or some kind of instrument thinking what we can measure. We think, what do we want? What do we want to investigate? What's the best way to do that? And that might be qualitatively or quantitatively. It might be through interviews. It might be through questionnaires. It might be through scientific experiments in the laboratory. It might be ethnographic studies, but that we fit the method to the question. We don't fit the question to the method. Yeah, we don't say, I do qualitative research, so I'm going to do this question. We start off with questions and then think, what's the best way to do that? So I often do quantitative research, but now and again, depending on my questions or my hypothesis, I sometimes will do qualitative research instead. Okay. So when we're thinking about science, there's lots of examples of unscientific claims. So the weather is good. We talked about, if you were there, 8:30 this morning, with my time anyway, 3:30 in Thailand, we were talking about the weather. So the weather is good. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is the greatest piece of music ever written. We should not steal or tell lies. What I'd like to ask you, just for a minute, because I've been talking about it for 10 minutes already, is in what ways are those unscientific? Have a think, and please feel free to either use the chat or ask me, and then I'll talk about it in a minute. Please feel free. I know it's not very easy. Okay, these are scientific in the sense that they are subjective. They're not scientific in the sense that they are subjective. Okay, so weather is good. So for example, to me, I would say today in the UK, the weather is cold, and you would probably say that too, because it's now probably about 2 degrees, it's gone up a couple of degrees. But if you come from Iceland, or you come from the Arctic Circle or Antarctica, the weather's not cold. It's probably quite warm. So it's not measurable in the same way. Okay, good or hot or cold isn't measurable. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is greatest for some people, but not for others. Okay, and we should not steal or tell lies is probably a good thing. Okay, but it's not inherently good or inherently scientific. Okay, it doesn't tell us anything about research questions. Okay, if you can think of any more, that would be great, but maybe I'll move on just now. Oops, for some reason it's not moving on. Oh, sorry. There we go. So in our field, US English is easier to understand than British English. Well, I'm a variationist, so I have a very strange idea about what British English might be. So I'm speaking Scottish English just now. It's not probably what you've heard. If you watch British TV, you'll hear Southern Standard British English. For British people, varieties of British English are probably easier than US English. If you're born in the US or you've heard US English more, it's probably easier to understand US English. Okay. Now this is the question and the main question, Chomsky question in linguistics, children possess an innate language acquisition device dedicated to language processing. Okay, this is Chomsky's idea. The trouble is, we can't open up people's heads. So we can't test this. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying it's with current technology, it's not testable. Okay, because we can't see in people's heads. Maybe in the future, we can have scanning techniques to see which part of the brain is dedicated to language. But for the moment, this is just a theory. And it's a theory we can't really test. Okay, now, in science, traditionally, there's been two opposing, or in philosophy, there's been two opposing fields. And philosophers have argued about this, and in Southeast Asia, East Asia, in the Middle East and in Europe, they've argued about rationalism. Now, rationalism is something which is provable. So, for example, this is early philosophy. All men are mortal, so all people will die in the end. Very nice man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Okay? Socrates will die one day. Of course he did. Or all writers are alcoholics, which is what we used to think in the UK. John is a writer. John is an alcoholic. Okay? Now, that's proof. That's rationalism. That's rational proof. Okay? Can we do this with everything? Can we? This is kind of mathematical proof. Can we do this with everything? No. We can't deduce everything from philosophy like in this way. This is called rationalism. Why not? Because not everything is easy and provable like this. It's not mathematics. Okay. So I'll come to this in a minute. There's a danger when we're doing research that we do what's called pseudoscience. And we do not use these scientific methods, so we don't have research questions. So, for example, we collect data, we do some analysis on it and say, what was I measuring again? Yeah. Which is, you know, if you've had undergraduate students, you realize this is sometimes what they come with you in the beginning and we have to guide them. We make vague, untestable claims, huge questions. So, for example, all Thai students can speak English better than Vietnamese students. How do we test that? It's not testable. We rely on confirmation rather than refutation. This is sometimes called going fishing. You're looking for results rather than saying, I'm going to be skeptical until I find a result. So, for example, if we believe that aliens live in, you know, others UFOs and they live in other planets, we don't have any evidence, but we go looking for it. So we should start with the premise that there's none, but let's test it anyway. Okay. And we ignore contradictory evidence. If we don't like evidence that we find or evidence that we don't find, we ignore it. So this is pseudoscience. So it's not real science. Okay. And we rely on arguments, introspection, i.e. what we think, and don't do our research, or, oh, this person is a professor, or this person's published 10 books. It doesn't necessarily mean they're right. We need to have evidence. And this is the important word in when we're doing data collection, that we have evidence. We don't have proof. We can't say for sure. We have evidence, and usually from a sample of people. And the kind of things that we do in education, or ELT, or applied linguistics, or social linguistics like me, we need evidence. Okay, and this is kind of a little cartoon talking about this. So the scientific methods, here are the facts, here is the evidence. What conclusions can we draw from this? Or, of course, in America at the moment, here's the conclusions. What facts can we find to support it? So the first one is very scientific. The second one is non-scientific. Okay, and that's kind of what we're facing. And I know the temptation when you have data is to try to find an effect, to try to find differences, for example, between, you know, one teaching method or another, or that one class gets a better score in English than another, or that language has changed from 20 years ago until now. But we have to investigate it. We can't just think, well, I want to think that language has changed, or I want to think that there's a difference in this teaching method. We need to find evidence for it. Okay. So I've kind of answered this question already. Why do research or experiments? Well, apart from the fact that I'm guessing you've done PhDs and you're very good at it, or some of you have done master's degrees or undergraduate degrees, you're very good at it. But sometimes, you know, sometimes we're funded to give our universities fund us to do research, or we need to do it for our qualification. Okay. If we develop research questions or hypotheses, and again, I'll talk about that later, we go beyond what we know. So, for example, if I've investigated, I don't know, attitudes to English in Thailand, I might want to investigate attitudes to English in Malaysia, or attitudes to English in Vietnam. Or if it's been done 20 years ago in Thailand, I might want to do it now and compare it to the past. Okay. We investigate causal relationships. We want to find out, for example, is this teaching method giving better results in the classroom if it's a TESOL class? Okay. If we train our teachers more, is it going to give the students better results? Are the students going to be happier? Etc. etc. Okay. It's very difficult to determine causal relationships, and we have statistical methods for it, but it's very difficult to establish cause and effect. So we know that people are poor in the world, including in the UK at the moment, for example, but the causes and effects of that poverty are very hard to understand. It's what we call many factors are interacting. So, for example, things like health, things like education, things like economy, family background, the weather circumstances, yeah, etc. The economy, price rises, inflation. I mean, these are all causes and effects of poverty. Okay, and just to give you a definition of an experiment, experiment is a simplified model of the world. And I mean a qualitative or quantitative experiment. So a simplified model of the world, which allows the researcher to manipulate a particular variable. Now you can see that I've put variable in italics here. And a variable is what we measure. So for example, I could measure lots of different variables. So for example, driving skill, I don't know, tiredness in the morning, the amount of time you spend on planning your teaching lessons, the number of students who turn up for the lecture. These can all change. And that's all a variable means, something which can change or vary, if you like. Okay, some myths about science and scientists, because I'm talking about this word science. It's a very scary word. Okay, to be scientific, you have to employ numbers and complex statistics. Some quantitative people, and I'm not one of them, will tell you, oh, if you do qualitative research, it's not real research because I want to see numbers. That's not true. Again, it's about using the method that most suits what you want to find out. The intuition of researchers, there's no role to play in science. No, people will say, if you're a scientist or you do research, it's not creative. It is. It has to be creative because you're going beyond what we know. And we have to think about how we can extend what we know, even in a very, very small way. Scientists are entirely objective, i.e. they don't have favorite ways of doing things, and they only care about truth. It's not really true. If I can, so for example, I come from a psychology background, as you might be able to tell. I was trained first of all to do, statistics and quantitative research If I can, if my question allows it, I sometimes do it that way because I find it easier, because I'm maybe a bit better at it than, you know, doing interviews or ethnographic studies or thematic analysis, which some of you might do, or discourse analysis. So, you know, I'm not entirely objective, and I'm guessing you would say, oh, you know, I kind of do qualitative things or quantitative things. That's okay. But think about the research questions, first of all. And scientists are loners who hide in the laboratories and office and never talk to anyone. Well, I don't know what you think about that. I know some people like that. I don't know what you think. Are people who do research introverts? Are they shy people? I don't know. Okay. Science as a collective enterprise. Oh, I'm going on quite a lot. Okay. As I said, we have a topic to investigate. We have a research question to investigate, a hypothesis to investigate. Different researchers approach the same problem from different ways. That's fine, because we're all trying to find evidence for what we want to investigate. If you think about the COVID pandemic, all over the world, for example, in the UK and Southeast Asia and Japan, in China and the US, and in Russia, we were all trying to find different cures, different evidence that, you know, we can develop something which would reduce COVID, and that's fine. And we came up with all sorts of different things. Some of them worked better than others, but that's the way that science works. Okay. Thinking about our research, when you publish your results, you must have a methodology section. The methodology section is quite hard to write, because if you're doing research, you want other people to read your research and then say, oh, okay, they've done this research in the south of Thailand with people from the south of Thailand. Why don't I do this research in Bangkok? Why don't I do this research in Chiang Mai? And the idea is that someone can take your methodology and replicate it. Now, replicate just means do it and, you know, update it, upgrade it to a different context or amongst different people. Now, that's a good thing, because you can also replicate other people's studies. Now, I think I've got about 7 PhD students, and I used to have 9, and they all come and try. At the beginning, they say, I'm going to do it like this, and I say, well, why don't you take someone else's study and expand it a little bit? So in your own paper, you can say, well, following Smith, 2002, this questionnaire, following the questionnaire employed by Smith, 2002, we used the following questions. Okay, that's okay. That's not plagiarism. That's not copying. That's replication. Okay, of course, you have to acknowledge your source. Okay, but we must write this in our methodology so other people can use it. Okay, so that's why the methodology is there, not to give you a hard time, although it does give you a hard time. It's to help you replicate it. Okay. Okay, I realize I've got some chat. So I've looked at linguistics as a wider field, and I know many of you are probably applied linguistics, more applied to classroom contexts or language policy contexts or teaching contexts. I've kind of looked a bit more widely, but let's have a look. Some of you will do second. Well, don't know why it's not coming up. Oh, there we go. Okay, this isn't really what I do, but in linguistics, theoretical linguists describe the rules that native and increasingly non-native, and I know these words are controversial. Let's call them L1 and L2. Speakers know and use, and explain the broad reasons for these conventions. So that's kind of what we call theoretical linguistics or descriptive linguistics. And some of you might do this. But for me, amongst other things, sociolinguists and applied linguists describe, and I do people's perceptions. I'll talk about that actually next week. Attitudes towards language diversity and the reasons for and implications of language use for the individual and wider speech communities themselves and society in general. Oof, that's a big long sentence. Now, all I'm really saying there is, in my kind of research and probably your kind of research, we've got something which It's called a so what question. Okay. And if you do educational research or PEFL research or sociolinguistic research or applied linguistic research, I look at attitudes and say, well, so what? If people are negative towards the way you speak, maybe that has social implications for if you get a job in a job interview, if you are found guilty in court for a crime, if people will trust what you're saying, believe what you're saying, treat you properly, etc., etc., etc. So that's my so what question. I think many of you, when you're developing questions and think, so what? Why am I doing this? What's the reason for doing this? And if you want to get published, I realized we had a session last week about getting published, or a couple of weeks ago. In our kind of journals, International Journal of Applied Linguistics, for example, there's always a so what question. Quite often the referee will come back and say, this study is really good, but what are the implications of this study? Okay. So has implications, for example, for educational policy, teaching practice, language acquisition, maybe if you're doing something in second language acquisition. And for me, for example, in wider society, I try to change policy. I'm trying to make accent discrimination, for example, outlawed in law in the UK, but you know, it's a long-term thing. I'll maybe talk about that next week. Now, I realize I'm a social linguist. I sometimes teach second language acquisition. And I think many of you will have studied second language acquisition, doing these talks last year and thinking about the audience. So if I was to ask you, take a minute to think, why is it so difficult to learn a second language in adulthood? Now, that's a huge question. This question is really about age. Have a think about it. Please feel free to write some comments as well, if you like, or to ask me something. Take a little minute because I've been talking a lot. Does anyone want to say anything? Okay. Well, it's a huge question, and some people tend to spend their whole career doing this. Oops. I don't know why it's not working very well. Okay, so there's lots of factors, and these are just some of them. It might be, and this is a very linguistic reason, there might be that there's a particular period, which we might call a critical period or a sensitive period, where you can learn language better as a child, but when you get to 7 or 12, you no longer have this faculty, you no longer have this skill, or you have it to a lesser degree. Now, this has been argued in second language acquisition by people like Krashen and Chomsky, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to go into that because that's another 2-hour lecture. Learning style. It may be that children learn differently than adults. It may be that children, particularly are more motivated to learn languages. For example, if you migrate, children tend to learn a language in order to participate with other people, whereas adults often learn a language because at school, because they have to. Yeah, or later, when I mean children, I mean younger children. Okay, children. Adults may be very forgiving, or other people may be very forgiving when they talk to children. They may give them more comprehensible input. They may make it easier and speak to children in a non-complex way that you wouldn't speak to adults. Okay. Children get better quality input, so people take more time with children and expect less of them, so children can develop at their own pace. And it might be when children learn a second language, they can also develop an L2 identity. And people like, well, you'll know people like Jennifer Jenkins have talked a lot about this. Okay, I wouldn't talk too much about these factors. So these are potential factors. There might also be other things. For example, can anyone say anything? Anyone want to add anything? Yeah, someone said, can we only have one language as a mother tongue? Yep, I agree. Second language acquisition often assumes monolingualism, whereas most people in the world are multilingual. Yep. So when we call it a second language, you could call it other languages. You're absolutely right, Wentang. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and second language and foreign language, yeah. I think that's something that's for another time, but you're right. Oh, sorry, there's something wrong with the... Yeah, well, okay. Now, another question. Why does teacher A get better results than teacher B? If you teach a language, for example, this is a very dangerous question, isn't it? Why does teacher A get better results than teacher B? Is it because teacher A is a better teacher? Okay. Is it that they have better teaching methods? They're more trained? More or less intimidating personality? So there's something about the personality of the teacher. I still go to talks and I prefer one lecturer to another. You can talk about me at the end if you like. Are one of them more likable? If someone's more likable, you're more likely to talk to them. Yep. Are they just better students? Can we compare students? So for example, if teacher A has all the top class students and teacher B has all the demotivated students, well, we're probably going to get better results. So are we comparing like with like? Are there better teaching conditions? So for example, I've taught, where have I taught? I've taught in Hong Kong, I've taught in France, I've taught in Poland, I've taught in Spain, I've taught in England, Scotland, Thailand a little bit as well. And obviously the teaching conditions are different. The size of the classes are different, etc., etc. The technology that I used is different. Okay. So again, there may be a multitude of differences between the two teachers. Difficult for research to infer which are most responsible for the difference in students' results. Now, the question here is, and with the other one, is can we investigate all of these? No, is the answer. We can't investigate all of these, and I realize other people put things in the chat. Yeah, Panachanok, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's also adults may feel more self-conscious and embarrassed, yeah, when they're learning a language. So yeah, we can't investigate all of these. So in a piece of research, we would try not to bite off too much. Yeah, we try not to eat it all. We try to investigate one of these things. Okay, so I'm guessing with research, try not to do everything. Here we go again. For some reason, it's not. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now I realize I've been talking a lot, but here's some terminology which might be very helpful. Now, if you've ever done statistics, this is the first lesson that you get in statistics. I'm always a bit worried when people say to me, well, I've never done any quantitative research because I don't like numbers. Statistics isn't just about numbers, it's about manipulating variables. And it doesn't matter if you're doing qualitative research or quantitative research or ethnographic research or grounded research or action research, you're all using variables. And I'll show you what this means. So this is a very formal definition, then I'll give you examples. So if you're thinking, what's he talking about? And you're not the first person to say that, I'll give you a formal definition. So that dependent variable is the thing that we are measuring. Okay, I could be measuring attitude, driving skill, proficiency, learning style. This is what we want to measure. This is sometimes called the effect. And we can measure this from a questionnaire, from an interview, from some kind of experiment, many, from observation sometimes, from ethnographic research, from lots and lots of different ways. All research questions or hypotheses contain a dependent variable because we must measure something. I know some of you won't like the word measure. We must investigate or examine something. Okay. An independent variable, for example, is something that we want to manipulate, that we want to change to see how it affects what we want to measure. So that might be social class. So we look at, in my field, we might look at, do people of a higher social class use one feature one word, if you like, more frequently, or one sound more frequently than people of a lower social class? Could be gender, could be first language, could be north of Thailand, south of Thailand, young, old. I'll give you some examples. Some research questions contain an independent variable. All research questions have a dependent variable. So, for example, attitude, teaching method, proficiency, etc., but not all. So, what is the effect of coffee on driving performance? Does anyone want to tell me there? What might be the dependent variable? What are we measuring? If we wanted to measure this, what would we measure first? Anyone want to give me a try? Don't be shy. I won't. Oh, don't be shy. Okay. Driving performance. Yeah, well done, Mohammed. Thank you for taking the time. Yeah, we measure driving performance. Okay, and we probably do that by testing someone in a car. Okay, and saying, "Oh, drive." So the question could be, what are, I don't know, I come from Northumbria University. What are Northumbria University linguistics students' driving performance? And I'll give them a driving test. Okay, and we get some kind of mean score, some kind of average score out of 10. Okay, now the independent variable is, this is an easier bit, it's coffee. So I've got a cup of coffee in my hand. I could have, who has it said at this time? Thank you for the chat. Yep, coffee, you're absolutely right. You've got maybe 30 people, no coffee, 30 people, 5 cups of coffee, test their driving performance out of 10. Okay, so what we're measuring there is driving performance overall, those with coffee, those without coffee. And that's the effect of coffee on driving performance. Okay, is it generalizable? Is it true for everybody in the world? No, but it's evidence. Okay. Oops. Oh, it's very slow. There we go. There's a research question. What's the effect of coffee on driving performance? Now, from before, we know that coffee makes people drive faster. They have more because their heart rate's increasing. There's a hypothesis. Can you tell me the difference between that research question and that hypothesis? It's investigating the same thing. Give it a go. Oh, here's someone else. So, yep, someone says we determine what we in the research question, it could be 2 directions. It could be that coffee is negative or coffee is positive. So you see, what's the effect? It could be a positive effect. It could be that coffee makes you better driver or coffee makes you worse driver. In the hypothesis, we are stating that we think coffee will be negative. And the reason that we can make a hypothesis or we develop hypothesis is that previous research in other places, maybe with other people at other times, using different cars or different tests, has told us that coffee will have a negative effect. If you want the very formal words, the research question is called one-tailed, you know, like a dog, one-tailed because it's one. Sorry, the research question is two-tailed because, like, you know, it can go in either direction, 2 directions. The hypothesis is one-tailed. It can just go in one way, i.e., we're just testing for negative. Okay, so it's research questions and the hypothesis are really, really hard to write. If you can think, and it doesn't matter what kind of research you're doing, what's your dependent variable? Are you going to have an independent variable? It's much, much easier. Start off with, what am I going to investigate? I hope this is useful. I realize it's quite dry, but I'm hoping it's useful. There's a couple of chat comments. Yep. Someone says, yep, a hypothesis of a negative relationship or the effect is neutral. Yep, well done. Thank you. That's absolutely right. I can talk, if you want to ask me questions about hypotheses, I'm happy with that as well. Okay, later on.
Excuse me, I've got a question.
On you go.
The independent variable can affect the dependent variable in a positive or a negative way.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so can you give me an example?
A coffee.
Yeah.
Example.
So coffee's a variable. You're absolutely right. Is it
Coffee,
tuna?
Yes, coffee. I would say coffee is an independent variable.
Yep.
So can affect the dependent variable in a negative and
right.
positive way.
Well,
is that right?
Yeah. So, for example, it could also, if we give someone coffee, it could enable their driving performance to be better, but it could also or worse. Yeah. So that's the research question. We could write three hypotheses. So this one research question, we could write three hypotheses. One of the hypotheses would coffee intake will have a negative effect on driving. The second hypothesis, coffee intake will have a positive effect on driving. And the third hypothesis, yeah, coffee intake will have no effect on driving performance. Yeah, so you could have, but from the previous research, we could say coffee intake will have a negative effect because we've known from before. But it doesn't mean in our study in Thailand in 2022 that it's going to have a negative effect. We can accept that hypothesis after we get our data, or we can reject that hypothesis.
No hypothesis. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. No, or yeah, you're absolutely. That's a good question. You can ask me that after if you like as well.
I will.
Yeah, no problem. Someone else put up their hand. Is that right?
Yes, from Mohammed Qasim.
Yes, I am a lecturer in applied linguistics here from Pakistan. I want to ask a question. I am doing a research, neuropersuasive analysis of Pakistani private universities' advertisements on their Facebook pages. So when I am making, the question is dependent and independent variable is just about quantitative, or it can be applied to qualitative studies as well?
Everything. You start off with your question, and then you think, what's the best way to investigate this question? You don't say, well, I'm going to do something qualitative, what can I do? Or I'm going to do something quantitative, what can I do? You have this question and you think.
Okay, I'm doing it qualitative now. So I think what would be dependent and independent variable in this case? Neuropersuasive analysis of Pakistani private universities' advertisement campaign on their Facebook official pages.
That doesn't sound like a research question to me. That sounds like a title.
Can you repeat, please?
It doesn't sound like a question to me. It sounds like a title.
Yes. This is the topic. This is the topic of research.
Yeah. So, you can't identify a dependent and independent variable from a title. It must be a question or hypothesis. So it's going to be something like, what is the effect of, I'm guessing, different methods of blah, 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 blah.
Okay. So I have which type of
study.
Yes, my question is, which type of neuropersuasive strategies have been employed in Pakistani private universities' advertisement? So which type of like neuropersuasive strategies?
Are you going to collect data?
Yes, I am collecting, going through all the Facebook official pages and having their posts and studying them using the neuropersuasive model by Ren Weiss and more in their book, The Code of
That sounds like a theoretical study. It sounds like theoretical. It sounds like a literature review. It doesn't sound like an experiment.
Yes. So
it's not an experiment. It's not a study. It's a primary study. It's a secondary study of literature. Yeah.
Okay. So can we say that dependent and independent variables are only concerned with when we have experimental research?
Yeah, or any. I mean, you're saying you're doing something qualitatively, but you're not actually collecting data.
Okay. But we have a very vague concept that is not much clear. We think that when we are reading the post or listening to speeches, and transcribing it, we feel like we are collecting data. Can you please correct me if I am wrong?
I can't answer your question because I don't really know what you're doing. But it doesn't sound to me like what it sounds like is, do you have any data?
Yes, like we have speeches, for example, if we are working on
so that's
persuasion.
data. Okay, so you're doing
Okay.
you do, but that's your data.
Right.
But I don't know, I don't know how you're going to analyze it. Can we talk about this at the end, because I think that, there's other people as well. Can we talk about it after we finish?
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much for answering.
No problem, Mohammed. Okay, let's talk about it at the end. Okay. If I had time, I might ask you to write research questions or hypotheses, but maybe we don't have time, unless anybody wants to. Perhaps at 1:30 we can talk about it. Okay. You'll also find examples of research questions in journals. I think people are quite interested in research, so I'll talk a little bit more about this. Where do they come from? They come from other published research. So you can take someone's research and say, maybe, to what extent is task-based learning an effective method of teaching English in Bangkok universities? You could easily change that to Chiang Mai University or Prince of Songkla University. So you'll find these questions in other research. You're trying to extend what we know in some kind of very small way. You don't need to change the field. If you imagine what we know about the world, you're just adding a very tiny bit. Well, at least that's what I'm doing. The last person to change linguistics completely was Noam Chomsky in 1959. I don't even remember 1959. Okay. In terms of extending evidence in time, so it could be that we're doing research in a different time from before, what we know before, a different region, a different country, a different population. So, for example, high university students, high secondary students, language or linguistic feature. So, for example, it could be a sound, a phonological feature, different. It could be a word. It could be a grammatical concept. It could be we're using different methods. And Mohammed's question about, can I use questionnaire? Maybe someone used a questionnaire and did it quantitatively. Well, this could be done through interviews, methods of analysis. Maybe we can use thematic analysis. Someone else used statistics. And it could be that we're trying to do a small scale study. So, for example, my studies, I do a pilot study of a very small population, and then I do a bigger study. Maybe I'm trying to generalize to a different population. Some people have questions like, do EFL teachers become better teachers as they get older? Well, are you trying to generalize to the whole world? That's a big population. You need a big sample. So how generalizable? Any others we might talk about? Don't be shy. Anyway, so, but we also think about, for me, doing research is something you're interested in, okay? It's also your experience, particularly if you're a teacher, your experience of practice. Your position, sometimes, if you're a researcher, then, you'll be part of a research team. The features of your school, your university or organization, you might want to find out something about your institution. I'll come to you in a minute, Mohammed, promise. Conversations with colleagues. So when you go to a conference, for example, you get ideas, don't you? People say, well, here's a research niche. And maybe, for example, Thai educational policy has changed. Well, you might want to do research into that because something external has happened. Okay. And also management pressure. People might say, you need to do this research. I think someone raised their hand. Is that right?
May I ask a little question?
Yeah, I mean, please ask the Dr. Baite as well, if it's okay, but I'm fine with it.
Okay. I think you use the term the thematic analysis. Recently, I used this technique of thematic analysis from some written text data. My supervisor said that when you are doing thematic analysis, it becomes too subjective. and it's not linguistics. I tried to convince him that I am finding persuasion, so I have to go at discourse level, at context level, using cognitive context and things. And many people still in our universities, they think like linguistic is just to finding grammatical features like use of personal pronouns and that level. I think when we say thematic analysis, so how can we justify it for in those situations and scenarios? They say it's too subjective. It becomes you're looking for themes using discourse features.
I mean, I can't really answer that question, but and I also can't I can't tell you what I can't say that your supervisor is wrong. But if you're going to use a particular method to try to investigate a particular research question, this is called, and other people here will know too, this is called operationalization. Operationalization is this the best method to measure what I want to measure? Yeah, that's called validity. It's called operationalization. So the idea of whether it's linguistics or not is not about this. That's a different question. That's not, you know, that's another thing. What you want to measure is this the best way of doing it? And, you know, thematic analysis isn't actually a method. It's a method of analysis. So you've already collected your data. So, you know, go back to the question, how did I collect my data? What's the best method to analyze that? It's a wider question. Does that help?
So you mean to say we can
Sorry,
use
I can't spend all this time with you just now because there's other people here.
Okay.
Right. Is that okay? And also
Yes, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you for your words.
You're welcome. And also specified by funders. Sometimes, so I got a grant, for example, recently by the British Academy. They said to me, you have to do a book. Yeah, you have to, we're going to fund you, but you have to write a book. So it meant a particular type of study. Okay. If you're going to formulate research questions, I hope this is, and I realize again, this is a little bit dry. Identify what other researchers know about the topic. Okay. Identify the key arguments, the themes, the issues which have emerged to date from the other research, and identify gaps in knowledge and identify disagreements about what is known in the topic. So if I had to summarize this, and I think I'll finish maybe in 5 minutes or so. What evidence, so there's 3 things there. What evidence do we have from before? Okay, so if you like, what do we know? What do we not know? What's missing? And if you look at a journal article for this bit, sorry, for the first bit, what do we know? You'll see researchers have very consistent sentences. They say things like, taken together, the results of prior studies have demonstrated a tendency. Okay. Overall, the prior research has generally indicated. Okay, so that's what do we know, or what is known. For what is not known, we have things like, however, there is a lack of research in the Thai context. There is a lack of research amongst children in Bangkok. There is a lack of research, although we know something about phonology, we don't know enough about lexis, about words. Yeah. Or although we know lots about the English language classroom, we don't know much about the French language classroom. You see words here about words like requirement, further requirement, lack of, limited, unknown. If it's been a long time, we say presently, currently. So maybe it was done 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and we don't know now. And after you do that, this is called the research niche. Some people call it research gap. You can see the word here. Then we can then say, therefore, given the above gap in the research literature, the following research questions have been developed for the study. This is just before the methodology at the end of the introduction. And we call these, and also someone said to me before, key terms. So can anyone think of any key terms that are very controversial in my field? I'll give you one. Native and non-native, as someone already said. Please feel free to put in the chat if there's any more terms which are controversial in your field. Don't worry. For me, other things like acquisition, change. I work on attitude. Attitude is a difficult term. Is it a thought, a feeling? Okay. I think I'm going to finish quite soon, but I'll just do a little bit more. I've got some questions now. This is kind of the types of questions that quantitative researchers tend to develop. Now, I'm not saying they're very different, but this is a kind of question. So if the topic is factors associated with level of spoken proficiency in L2, i.e. non-native, if you like, secondary school children, the general research question may be, what's the relationship between family background factors and level of spoken proficiency in L2 in secondary school children? Can you tell me the dependent variable? The dependent variable is level of spoken proficiency.
Spoken proficiency.
Yep, level of spoken proficiency. And the independent variable?
Background factors.
Family background factors could be different, yeah. And again, a more specific research question is, what's the relationship between socioeconomic status? So that's a little bit more refined of the family and spoken levels of proficiency in L2 secondary school children. So instead of family background factors, we've been very, very specific. The more specific you can be, the easier it is to investigate your research question in my field. Okay, now, this is a kind of question that qualitative research, I called it interpretive because you can do anyway, this research qualitative or quantitatively. How do UK learners of English experience of studying foreign languages and adult education programs impact on attitudes towards immigration in England? The dependent variable is, it's very long, the dependent variable here.
Attitudes towards immigration in England.
Yep, in England, yep. And the independent variables is UK learners' experience of studying foreign languages. Yeah. So there's a more qualitative research question with a dependent variable and an independent variable. And again, for how do language teachers' personal values affect relationships between L1 and English to speakers in the classroom? I've made very difficult research questions here just to show you that even with these kind of questions, you can identify a dependent variable. What's the dependent variable? It's the relationship between L1 speaking and L2 English speaking pupils in the classroom. That is a really hard thing to investigate. And the independent variable?
Language teachers' personal values.
Yep, there you go. So any type of research you do, it always has a dependent variable and often an independent variable. I think I'm going to finish quite soon. I do have a little bit more, but I've got a little bit further reading here. Some of this is more, oops, oh, I'm so sorry, right, okay. Some of this is very introductory. Some of this is a little bit more heavy. Some of it's sociolinguistics, some of it's applied linguistics. So BEL is something which at my university we give to people, to our undergraduate or master's degree students who are not used to doing research. So it'll talk about starting off research. For people who are doing educational research, this Conan, Mannion and Morrison book, Research Methods in Education, some of you will know this. It's a very comprehensive book about doing educational research. If you want to think about ethics, I haven't talked about ethics, about how, you know, you have to be honest and open with people and, you know, not harm them in any way. Da Costa. Dorney, who unfortunately just died recently, Research Methods in Applied Linguistics, he talks quite often about qualitative and quantitative. He's a bit more competitive between qualitative and quantitative than I am. I'm kind of, all research is good if it's done properly. This is an introductory bad science book. It's about you know, how not to do good science, how to do horrible research. I talked a little bit about my research, language attitudes. If you're interested in language attitudes, there's an introductory book with all sorts of different chapters on how to measure language attitudes. This is the 2 books of my language attitude stuff. I'm not saying you have to read them. I'm saying this is what I do. If you're interested in where I come from and I talk about research. If you want to do sociolinguistic research, which is what I do, this is lots of different sociolinguistics papers, qualitative and quantitative, collecting data. That McKenzie one isn't me, that's someone else. And I know many of you are very frightened of statistics. If you ever have to do statistics, this is the book Pallant. It's the one that I use with my classroom, okay? Because it's nice and straightforward. If I've been teaching statistics for, I've been doing statistics since I've been 17. I'm not 17 anymore. When I forget how to do my statistics, I go back to this introductory book. Okay, it's not about linguistics or education, but it's really, really helpful. Okay. I also had something else, but I'll put this up and I'll maybe share something else if possible. Just, I'm not going to go over it with you, but I'll give this to Dr. Yusuf. This is about the structure of a research paper. Okay. And please either email me or Dr. Yusuf will hopefully put it up. This is about the structure, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion. It's a very overview, but I knew I wouldn't have time to do it, but I just thought it might be helpful. Thank you so much for listening. I'm very aware.
Actually, you can send me the file now, and then I can share on the chat box with the participants today.
I've stopped sharing, so I'm quite happy to answer any questions or discuss.
Professor Robert.
Hi, you can call me Robert.
Can I call you Rob?
Prefer not. I'm Scottish. Rob is very English.
All right. Well,
does that mean I can call you June?
No problem. That'll be all right. Okay. Professor Robert, would you please be so good as to fill us in with some information on parametric and non-parametric tests? Because as far as I'm concerned, it has something to do with your data distribution. And if your data distribution deviates from normality, you must employ a parametric test. But is this truly necessary with performing linguistic research?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice statistical question. When you're doing statistics, if you have what's called a normal distribution, which means that your data is nice and you have a big sample, you have lots of data, and it's all distributed very nicely, you can do very high level statistics called very strong statistics called parametric statistics. Okay, I will just finish. Parametric statistics. If your data is a bit messy and it's mathematically incomplete, and I won't go into any more than that, you do something called non-parametric statistics. Now, in the Pallant book, you know, that I just talked about, the statistics, will tell you to do parametric statistics, to do these strong statistics, if you like, you can do a test to test your data. You can do a kind of investigation and it'll tell you, can you do this parametric statistic on it? So in the Pallant book, I won't go into details because it's a very fine-grained question, but you can do what's called a test assumption. And if you pass the test assumption, you use these robust deep level statistics.
Excuse me, I'm sorry that I'm cutting in again.
That's all right.
You're talking about the reliability test. No, It's another.
Yeah, for each statistical test, they're different. It's called an assumption test. Can I recommend this palette? I might have this. Hold on, I might have this palette book in the house, but I'm not sure.
All right.
Sorry. Oh. No, I'm not sure. Yeah. This is an older version. Sorry, it's upside down. Of course, it's upside down. This is Palin, SPSS. This is the 4th edition. This is what I use. That says SPSS. I know it's the wrong way around. Okay. This book can help you. I promise I don't have shares in it. I don't get any money for saying this book is good. I promise. I've been using it for a long time. It will help you to conduct the test. Is that helpful?
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Lovely Scottish accent, by the way.
I grew up in Glasgow.
I can tell.
Yeah, I'm a Glaswegian.
Same as me.
Paisley.
Yeah, almost Glasgow. Thanks, Tuna.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you.
No problem.
Prof, can I ask you a question?
Of course you can, Dr. Baiti.
You mentioned that there are two research paradigms, right? Positivism and interpretivism.
Yeah.
And then I would like to know which one do you think that people often used in sociolinguistic research?
I mean, there's actually more than two. There's also something called critical, but I felt like I was giving you too many research questions. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to make a distinction between interpretive and critical. I think you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that it depends on the research question. But if I can be a bit more forward than that, when sociolinguistics started, and I can realize you're a sociolinguist too, we had what's called Lebovian sociolinguistics. Yeah, I know you know Lebov, sometimes called quantitative Lebovian sociolinguistics, sometimes called first wave sociolinguistics, sometimes called quantitative sociolinguistics. And these studies tended to use big samples, and they tended to, like, for example, Lebov's study was in New York, and he had a big sample of people from New York, and he tried to say that New York people did this in different classes, social classes, yeah. So yeah, that tended to use quantitative methods or positivity, these quantitative methods, because he was trying to generalize to the whole of New York. Yeah. In some other more recent research, it's not the kind of research that I do. People like Penny Eckert, they'll use for what's called community of practices. So small groups of people who do things together and try to look at it as a very local level. And they tend to use kind of interpretive questions because they're not trying to generalize to huge, they're not trying to say everybody in Thailand does this. They're trying to say maybe these people who I don't know, who go to a restaurant on Saturday nights together or play in a basketball team. They're trying to look at it in very fine-grained, deep way with small groups of people, and these tend to use these kind of interpretive questions. But that's a very general way of putting it. You know, you can do quantitative research in a smaller scale, and you can do qualitative research on a very larger scale too. But that's a generalization. That's a great question.
Thank you, Prof. Is there any other questions from the audience, from the participants today?
Yes, Professor Robert. When we're conducting research in the field of applied linguistics and sociolinguistics, qualitative content analysis and thematic analysis, I mean, always two main approach where we analyze, the data, right?
Data analysis rather than the method, yeah.
I have been asking many scholars and many friends reading through the books, and I haven't get any clearly answers. How these two, what are the differences? Between these two approach and how do we know when we should use thematic analysis and when we should use the qualitative content analysis?
This is great. I mean, to me, this isn't methods of data. This isn't a method of data collection. This is a method of analysis. So it's going beyond what we were talking about, kind of thing. I mean, generally, look at your research question and think, how did I collect this data? Okay, and I've got this data. How can I do this that helps me to answer? And answer's not the right word because we don't find answers to questions, we address them. What's the best way of deeply addressing this? Okay, now that's a very hard question, and it's a kind of philosophical question. Another way to do it is to say, well, Smith 20 years ago did it this way. So able to compare my results with Smith 20 years ago, I'm going to use the same method. Because if you use the same method as analysis as Smith, the data is comparable. And you can talk about changes or differences between if someone does it 20 years ago or someone does it in another area. So in some ways, it's very field dependent. I come from a psychology background, and so many of the statistical texts that I use come from psychology. But other people come from a very theoretical linguistic background, and they might use other statistical techniques. It's not that these techniques are wrong or better or worse. It's that they're grounded in the field that you've done before. So if you're using a different technique, so maybe if people have done thematic analysis and before you want to use critical methods, a different critical method, what you're saying is, I'm comparing my method with their method, which to me would be part of your research question. You would be asking a different question. If you're using the same broad method, then you're comparing the data from before or elsewhere till now. So I know that's I've not really given you a very satisfying answer, because there's no answer. Because any method you choose has its advantages and its disadvantages. And you know, when I've got PhD students, I always tell them, write a huge limitations section in your thesis, because it's a kind of get out clause. It's kind of saying, yeah, my research isn't perfect, and I recognize that. Because if people say, I've developed this method and it's great, and I've answered the question, what you're saying is nobody else ever needs to do research. Another thing, Yusuf, if you've got funding, is if you use one method, you then have another research question to say you can use another method. I've used thematic analysis. However, if I use critical, I might find a different result. So you can do 2 studies and compare them and get twice as much funding. But I never said that. Don't quote me on that. Yeah, I mean, what you've asked is a really good question, because what you're really asking is there better ways of doing things? Yes, but we also, as researchers, we have to make choices, and none of those choices are perfect.
Okay, so Prof, we have one question from the participant today. Let me read it out. Can I ask how the ethnographic method is used in applied linguistics or sociolinguistics?
That's a huge question. Again, it's usually used with small scale participants, because to do ethnographic studies is very, very time consuming. So it would be odd to use an ethnographic study amongst 300 participants, because you wouldn't be able to get the depth of knowledge and the depth of time to spend with them to answer the question, to address the question. So if your research question is very, very small scale in the sense that you need just a few participants, or you're going to analyze, you're able to spend time with those participants, you know, for example, like what we call in social linguistics community of practice group, some very small group, then ethnographic methods might be useful. But again, you know, be careful of saying, I'm going to use ethnographic methods. What am I going to investigate? Have your question and then think, what's the best way to do it? Otherwise, for me, it's the road to madness. You can just go around in circles forever. Great question. That's Mohammed, is it?
Yeah, Mohammed.
Yeah.
Yes, his hand just now. Okay.
I have done thematic analysis, but I'm not an expert in it. But there's different models for thematic analysis, and you should choose the one which is most appropriate for you. I have a paper in International Journal of Applied Linguistics that I published in 2017, and I justify my choice for thematic analysis. I used a particular type of thematic analysis that I was measuring attitudes, and I wanted to divide it into positive, negative, and neutral. And my type of thematic analysis worked for that, but other types of thematic analysis might work for what you want to do. So I think my question for that is be open. If you send me a thing on Facebook, I'll send you the link. Or, you know, on here somewhere. Is that okay? Thank you, Mohammed.
Okay, is there any questions from the participants? Feel free to ask. You can either unmute your microphone or you can type in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Again, Mohammed Qasim here. There is one more little confusion. Sometimes we do have hybrid departments at universities, like linguistics and literature people working together. And sometimes the department uses for thematic analysis based on the concept that going for themes and these studies being more subjective, they are confined only to literature researches. So when you are doing for linguistics, you need some linguistic concrete tools, what they call language is a self-contained system, and they don't go for thematic analysis based on their paradigm that it's concerned only for studies and researches in literature. So how can we justify that thematic analysis be a part of linguistic studies as well? Your words may be helpful for me.
To me, I mean, there's people in this audience today, in this group that we're talking together, who are more robust in their understanding of thematic analysis than me. But to me, you know, looking when I did my study, I analyzed the data 6 years ago. There was lots of linguistic studies using thematic analysis. To me, it's a well-established procedure in linguistics, particularly applied linguistics. I mean, there's lots of studies. I think if you go to the literature on thematic analysis and look for some studies in linguistics, that you'll find lots. You don't even need all the studies, maybe just even the abstracts. But for your study, I can't justify your method because I don't know your study or your questions, you know.
About the online sessions.
Okay, is there any other question?
Can I make this discussion more concrete by sharing my research questions as well?
Dr. Bayati?
Mohammed Qasim.
Yeah, Muhammad Qasim, again, your question again?
Can I make the discussion more concrete? I mean, by sharing my research questions as well. So it will be a concrete
Okay.
example.
Because the time is running out. So maybe if if it's related to your PhD directly, maybe you can contact to Professor Robert by contacting to send to his email, maybe.
It's okay. It's okay. Nice for me.
So you can keep going the session.
Okay. No more questions from the participants, from other participants? Maybe Muhammad Qasim, if you have any other questions, maybe you can contact the speaker later, because we are running out of time. We still have 2 things to do.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your interest. Any other ideas? Who wants to share?
If there is no question, Ajahn Mayati, you can make conclusion now.
Okay. So today we have listened to an interesting lecture. It's very robust, Prof. It's very nice. We can see the process of doing research, how we can formulate research questions, and the way that we can decide whether it has to be dependent variables or independent variables. All will be very helpful for us in the future. So maybe we can apply what we have learned today in your lecture for our future research. Thank you so much for the presentation. I hope it will be very, very beneficial for all the participants who joined today's event. So for the participants, now we would like you to complete our evaluation form. The form is already sent in the chat box. You can check and then please complete it for us. Your feedback is will be very helpful for us so that we can use it for our future development.
And thank you to I put the just to say I put the article I talked about with the thematic analysis. It's not perfect. It's not my thing, but I put the article in the chat. Thank you, Dr. Bayati.
You're welcome.
Yes, and Nathan Majati, could you please introduce the next event, please?
Okay, so while you are completing your evaluation form, let me introduce our next event by Prof. Robert, again, on the 10th of this month. Okay, if you can see, I share with you. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Yes, now. Yeah. We can see the screen.
Oh, okay. Now, it's also on sociolinguistics. So the title is called Social and Regional Variation. It's on the 10th of December, the same time from 3:30 p.m. To 5:30 p.m. Thai time. Okay, so we hope to see you again on this special event in the same month, after 1 week from now.
I also sent the link for the registration already in the chat box, actually.
Okay, so if you have time, you can just register now so that to book your seat. And then shortly afterwards, we will give you a link for e-certificate, the thing that everyone has been waiting for. Shortly. Okay.
Okay, how we are going to complete this assessment form? A little bit guidance, please.
Normally we just click to the link. Can you access to the link?
Yes, I think they are requiring some project ID.
Okay. In that case, you don't have to be worried about that. Okay. We always face these kinds of problems. So maybe you just go to register for our next coming event, and also for the collecting of the certificate, it should be enough. If anyone are not able to access the link of the assessment, you don't have to be worried about that.
Okay, the e-certificate is already posted in our chat box. Please also complete the form, and the e-certificate will be generated automatically and will be sent it to your email address that you have typed into the form. So, Prof. Robert, would you like to say anything about your next event? Maybe
you'd like to say something about your next event, like an session.
Now, yeah, it's very, very nice of you to invite me for that. This one is more linked to social linguistics, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about world Englishes and English in Thailand, because some of you might know that I've done a bit of research in Thailand, and if I've got time, I might give you a bit of data. I'm also going to give you, I had some speech samples for today, but because it was nice and interactive, I didn't play them. I've got some speech samples for next week. So, for example, Indian English and Thai English and UK English and different examples, which might be quite interesting. The distinction between social linguistics and applied linguistics is very fuzzy. They're very similar projects. So I hope if you do applied linguistics, we can talk about social linguistics too. Yeah, Scottish English too, Tuna.
Yeah, maybe you also can.
Doric, or your stuff.
Glaswegian. Scottish Standard English.
Glaswegian.
If any of you, I've been working on Northern and Southern English, so English in England, and I'll show you some of the language changes that are happening in the UK at the moment. Of course, when you study English in Thailand and then you come to the UK, you realize English is completely different to what you studied. So I'll show you some of the things, some of the changes that are happening.
Particularly in Scotland.
Yeah. And not Pakistani English, but Indian English, Mohammed. Sorry. It's been a long time. It's been 5 years since I've been in Pakistan.
Prof, have you done any research on Thai English, or you consulted any?
I've looked at. I've done two papers on Thai English. You mentioned some of them. Some of the titles today. One looking at attitudes towards different varieties of English, so Asian Englishes and Scottish English, UK Englishes and American Englishes, and I'll talk about that next week. And also, I've done about how Thai people identify different varieties of English. How do they identify Indian English, for example, by the phonology or for the words or so there's a couple of papers. I'm quite happy to send those. If you're interested, I can send them now.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, yeah. Happy to see that. Happy to read.
No, I'm not allowed to send. I'm not allowed to send other people's papers, but I can send my own.
Yeah. Anything, Prof, that you can share with us, we would like to read.
This is one here.
Okay.
Does it? Is it coming up?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it comes.
Can you download them to us? I'm not able to
download.
Yeah,
and I'm putting them. I've downloaded them on the chat as well here. Are they coming up?
Okay, two of them. Yeah, you have sent.
These are both in Thailand.
The third one and the fourth one I will send you myself. Okay, I have lots of paper about Thai English.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
I know you work in a very similar area. Dr. Bayati, do you work in social linguistics too?
I'm interested to do one research in sociolinguistics, but I have not collected the data. I have the research proposal in my hand, but in the process of beginning to do it. So if I read your paper, maybe I can get some ideas.
Yeah, but I'm not saying my papers aren't perfect.
Yeah, I will see it.
Like every researcher, there's things wrong with it.
Respected Professor Robert, can I say a few words?
Hey, you okay with that? You have to ask the chair, but I'm okay. But you have to ask Dr. Bayati.
May I ask you questions? Just few words.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, Professor Robert, an interesting thing when you talk about Pakistani English, I would like to share with you. Actually, in our university, we have English Language Center, and our head of department is also Assistant Professor Ibrar. He has been a student of you at Glasgow University, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That when I talked with him about you, he also told me a few things about you. He worked with you. So that was, I thought I would. Thank you.
Very nice to know.
So that was about you. So we worked together at university. I just wanted to ask, can we go ahead for working in the area of Pakistani English, despite the fact that there is Indian English already prevailing? Can we make this separate studies and do work for that? Is it possible for us?
There's lots of work on Pakistani English. Lots and lots and lots of work. I was in University of Education in Lahore 4 years ago, and the conference was about Pakistani English. And I'm going to speak on the 16th of December, I'm going to speak to the Linguistic Association online, the Linguistic Association of Pakistan in Punjab University in Lahore. And the conference again is about Pakistani English. There's so much research out there. There is lots of research.
Okay. So as you told about Indian, so I thought that there might be a possibility. So
there's lots and lots of research about Pakistani English from different areas, from Urdu, from Punjab, lots and lots of stuff.
Hope so. When you will come here, we will have an opportunity to meet you as well.
Yeah, well, conferences are now, like today, the conferences are now mainly online, so I don't know when I'll have a chance to go to Pakistan. I'm giving a paper on the 16th in Pakistan, but like today it's online.
Okay, I will try to be there, inshallah. I will attend that. Hope so.
What is it you say, inshallah?
That the Arabic term we use for if God wills, that shows our enthusiasm for attending something.
I know, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Yusuf, do you have anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add.
Ajahn Faiza?
Anything?
Do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Ajahn Faiza is our colleague in the same department.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
She is going to be the one who is going to visit the UK next year as well.
Oh.
So maybe you can meet her if we have had an opportunity to visit you at your university in January.
Yeah. Which part of the UK are you going to?
1 week in the south, at Southampton University, and another week in the north part of the UK. Actually, Dr. Bayati would like to join us too, but because of some conditions, so she was not able to join us.
Yeah,
that's
very
okay.
Sad. Very sad. In the future. In the future.
It's Saturday evening in Thailand. People like to go out and eat. I know, I've been to Thailand. People like to go out and eat on a Saturday evening. So I'm very grateful for you to come on a Saturday afternoon when I know you could be doing more interesting things than listening about dependent and independent variables. It's very nice of you to attend. I'm not so big-headed that I think to listen to me on a Saturday afternoon rather than eating delicious Thai food is better.
So maybe for today, For today dinner, Ajahn Faiza and Ajahn Mujati, we are going to discuss about dependent and independent variables.
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, so Ajahn Mujati, maybe you can time to say time to close the session, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to thank again Professor Dr. Robert McKenzie for this beautiful presentation. We like your presentation. At least for us, when we do research, sometimes we tend to forget what we learned in the past. When you remind us again, and then we try to think, while you're presenting your slides, so we are thinking. So it will help us to formulate our research question, or if we have the research questions in our hand, maybe we have to look back and see what you have presented today, whether it matches what we have. Maybe we have to reformulate, so I think it's very useful. And thank you so much. And thank you for all the participants for your interest in joining us today. So we hope to see you again in our next session on December 10th at the same time from 3:30 to 5:30 Thai time. Okay. And I will be there again, inshallah. We say in Prof, thank you so much and see you next week.
Thank you too. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Bye. Have a good day, Prof.
Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf, for providing the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Hope to see you again next week, Muhammad Qasim.
Yes, why not? I shall be there.
Yes, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
Professor Robert, maybe could you please send me your PowerPoint slide, because I have to attach with the report.
Yep, no problem. By email is okay?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Yep. Is there anything else you need to ask me before we go, or do you have?
Just make sure that you just make sure that you have enough room for 4 of us, okay, in the UK.
Please.
For the stuff, because I'm doing the talk next week too. Was I talking too fast or giving too much, or?
I think this
is already nice. Great.
I think this year is better than the last year. Last year was very fast actually, but this year was, I mean today it was better comparing to last year.
I mean,
Totally agree.
Oh, that's excellent. I mean, it's quite a hard topic.
Professor Robert, next week, Ajahn Fatima, she is going to be your moderator. Now, time to discuss between both of you.
Yeah, good afternoon from Thailand.
Oh, hello, Fatima. Hello, Dr. Fatima.
Yeah, so see you next week.
Yeah, no problem.